So today, the main chapter that I wanted to deal with was balance of payments, and then we'll try and see if we can move on to the exchange rate as well in the in the same lecture. In front of you, there are basically four questions that have come so far on the balance of payments, but it hasn't come in your variant. So this particular topic is due for our variant. It has come in 2023 and 2025, mainly February मार्च में ज्यादा आए हुए हैं and जून नवंबर के अंदर आए हैं. But if you notice, the key thing in it is the policies. Even जो chapter इन्होंने दिया है ना, the chapter 48 in Bamford, the heading is policies to correct disequilibrium in the balance of payment, right? So when we look at the chapter, and I'll go over the chapter in it, the thing is कि बैलेंस ऑफ पेमेंट पूछा है. एएस में हमने करंट अकाउंट पे मेनली फोकस किया है. आई यूजुअली टीच बोथ द कैपिटल एंड द फाइनेंशियल अकाउंट ऑल्सो, ताकि हम पूरा बीओपी को देख लें. बट इसके अंदर you need to have basic understanding of what balance of payment is, but the key questions are always about the correction of it, कि किस तरीके से balance of payment को ठीक करना है. If you look at the questions, and we'll solve these specifically, but before we go into the theory, let's just take a look at how the questions are being asked. Like, for example, if you look at the first question, it says, expenditure reducing policy will reduce balance of payment deficit, but it will cause significant unemployment. So if you notice, there are two macroeconomic objectives which we need to discuss, which is एक तो balance of payment का deficit correction and the unemployment, and how these two gets affected by something called the expenditure reducing policy. We want to make sure that we don't make mistakes in assessing what these policies are, because ये knowledge and understanding की बात हो जाती है. Expenditure reducing policy. So let's just keep in mind that there is some policy expenditure reducing which हम अभी chapter के साथ deal करेंगे. Then the question is, an increase in government's budget surplus, ये आपका fiscal policy हो गया, will increase unemployment in the short run, but it will make it easier to control the balance of payment deficit on the current account in the long run. So it's targeting, ये तो almost ऐसा लग रहा है ये AS के questions हैं, because similar theme, right? But सिर्फ इस क्वेश्चन में तो बिल्कुल ही ये AS का है. पहले क्वेश्चन के अंदर तो एटलीस्ट एक्सपेंडिचर रिड्यूसिंग पॉलिसी का नाम लिया हुआ है, जो यूजुअली हम AS में पढ़ाते हैं, बट वी डोंट गिव इट दैट नेम. Okay. Here, the next one, the third one, is talking about that with the help of a diagram, evaluate the effectiveness of the use of expenditure switching policy. Now, that's another policy introduction to reduce the current account deficit on the balance of payment, and they want a diagram. Uh, expenditure reducing policy, switching policy. So clearly we're talking about tariffs and all. So यहाँ पे tariffs का diagram and eventually how it reduces current account deficit. So again, काफी हद तक AS ही है, but from protectionist point of view. And then lastly, the use of tariff is the most effective way to correct the balance of payment deficit. So with the help of diagram evaluate. So pretty much वही question आ गया नवंबर के अंदर. बट इस बार स्विचिंग पॉलिसी के बजाय उन्होंने स्पेसिफिकली टारगेट किया टू टैरिफ्स. ठीक हो गया? ओके, सो लेट्स गेट इनटू इट. The first thing that I would like to go over in this one is, I'm sure कि हमें थोड़ा बहुत तो AS से याद होगा, but when we talk about balance of payment statement, some of the idea is similar to जो आपने AS में किया हुआ है. So to remind you, Balance of payment is a statement which records all transaction with of a country with international other countries, right? That's what it is. तो उसके अंदर हमारे सेम आइडियाज हैं. एनी टाइम द मनी इज कमिंग इन, यू टेक इट एज अ क्रेडिट एंट्री, दैट्स कंसिडर्ड एन इनफ्लो. And anytime the money is going out of the country for whatever reason, it is considered an outflow. Okay. Um, इसी आइडिया को, बिकॉज रिमेंबर एएस इज स्टिल पार्ट ऑफ योर कोर्स एंड देन सर्कुलर फ्लो भी है ए2 के अंदर. तो सर्कुलर फ्लो के अंदर जरा ट्रेड बैलेंस जो हो जाता है ना, एक्सपोर्ट इंपोर्ट, एंड देन कनेक्ट कन्वर्टिंग देम इनटू इनफ्लोज एंड आउटफ्लोज एंड हाउ इट विल अफेक्ट द अदर इकोनॉमिक ऑब्जेक्टिव, दैट्स आल्सो समथिंग दैट वी शुड नो. Balance of payment basically has three accounts, as we are aware. सबसे पहले हमारा करंट अकाउंट है. जब हम करंट अकाउंट पढ़ते थे तो उसके अंदर वी हैड फोर अकाउंट्स. वन वाज द ट्रेड इन विजिबल्स या गुड्स, एंड देन देयर इज ट्रेड इन इनविजिबल या फिर सर्विसेज. इन दोनों को ऐड कर देते हैं तो ट्रेड इन बैलेंस निकल आता है, राइट? उसमें हम बेसिकली एक्सपोर्ट माइनस इंपोर्ट को नेट ऑफ कर रहे होते हैं. ठीक है, सो ये बेसिकली ट्रेड बैलेंस हो जाता है इन दोनों नंबर्स को ऐड. C was our primary numbers, primary incomes, and D was our secondary incomes. So to remind you, AS के point of view से primary incomes के अंदर we basically take the all the incomes that is generated from like stocks, bonds, stocks pay dividends, bonds pay interest, um, businesses pay profits, and workers' compensation. Workers' compensation kya thi? Workers' compensation was that a Pakistani goes to UAE, works over there, individual is still a Pakistani resident, less than a year, sends the money back home to his relatives while working over there. That is called workers' compensation. Secondary incomes के अंदर gift, charity, donations, remittances. Remittances is um, a Pakistani who has migrated abroad or has moved abroad more than a year, works over there, family still in Pakistan, sends money to family in Pakistan. That's called remittance. There's a difference of the time duration, less than a year, primary incomes, more than a year, secondary incomes. तो इस तरह से हम इसको डिस्टिंग्विश करते हैं. इसमें भी इनफ्लोज माइनस आउटफ्लोज लेते हैं. And then whatever number we get as a result, whatever the total is, usko hum kehte hain, this is our current account balance. If it's positive, if the balance is positive, we're in a surplus. If it's negative, we are in a deficit, right? And if it's equals, then we have a balance in the current account. That's the concept. So that's our first account, which you already know from AS. Okay. The second component that we have is called a capital account. Okay. Usually they say capital account. If I read from Bamford exactly, कि capital account क्या होता है? So Bamford says the capital account is a relatively small part of the BOP. It includes non-produced, non-financial assets. Non-produced, non-financial assets. Example basically is that Pakistan owes money to IMF and US and all these Saudi Arab and all. Okay. Now, for whatever reason, like COVID happened and all, we asked them कि हमारा आप debt माफ कर दें. Okay. So if they agree and they say, okay, fine, we'll just, off your $500 million जो है हम debt forgive कर दे. Okay. So that transaction will be considered as an inflow of debt forgiveness. ये capital account के अंदर जाता है. Okay. Because you did not produce anything, you haven't earned anything over here. It's just something that you owed, which now on the books you've been forgiven. Right. So another point was एक तो हमारा हो गया debt forgiveness, and then there are a lot of Pakistanis, almost like 8.5 lakh every other year, who migrate abroad, right? So basically, they sell off their assets over here, maybe homes and stock accounts, and sell off their cars and all, and then convert them into like Australian dollars, and then they move and they go out of Pakistan and they take the money with them. Capital account will also include that money which is going. Again, it's not some additionally earned income, it's your existing income which you've converted and now you've decided to take out. इसी तरह से if a company sells off their patents or their trademarks, तो ये भी जो है इस एक तरीके से कैपिटल अकाउंट की ट्रांजैक्शंस के अंदर रिकॉर्ड होता है. ठीक है, so ये हो गया आपका second account, which is capital. If money is coming in, you have a surplus in the capital account. If the money is going out net, it's called deficit. फिर उसके बाद जो लास्ट एंड वन ऑफ द फॉरमोस्ट जो हमारी हम इंटरनेशनल ट्रेड पे भी कनेक्ट करेंगे, सॉरी फॉरेन एक्सचेंज पे भी कनेक्ट करेंगे, इट इज योर फाइनेंशियल अकाउंट. ओके. Now, financial account it is usually bigger than capital account. It is a large part of some countries' balance of payments. It is basically movement of funds, financial funds in and out of the country in which you expect to make certain profits. Okay, this is basically, you know, for profit motive. So, इसके अंदर, as per Bamford, they've broken it down into four parts, and I'll explain you the four parts. I think they're very simple, not so difficult. Um, so इन द फाइनेंशियल अकाउंट एक तो होती है जिसको हम कहते हैं फॉरेन डायरेक्ट इन्वेस्टमेंट. दैट्स एक्चुअली एन एग्जांपल for direct investments done by the foreigners into a country. They set up a factory, like for example, you can say pharmaceuticals in Pakistan. ठीक है? Foreign pharmaceuticals in Pakistan, GlaxoSmithKline or something like that. It's a foreigner putting in a whole factory, making people work over here. So that's a physical presence. Okay. Then number two is called the portfolio investment. In this one, they do bring in the money, but the money just directly goes in the stock exchange. Existing companies, like let's suppose एक local company है called High Noon Laboratories, pharmaceutical के अंदर है, it's a local firm, but foreigners decide that it's a good profit making, we should invest in this one particular. तो वो जाके क्या करते हैं, they're not setting up new factories, they're just taking ownership of the share. Okay. फिर उसके बाद एक हमारी होती है जिसके अंदर there's not specific name for it, but it says like other investments. Now this one is more on the short term, like foreigners might see कि पाकिस्तान का बैंक अकाउंट जो है बैंक के अंदर अगर हम पैसे रखते हैं तो अच्छा परसेंटेज the banks are offering us like 10.5% or maybe 9%. It's a good amount of money. या इंटर गवर्नमेंट लोन्स होते हैं जो कंट्रीज के बीच के अंदर होते हैं, तो ये इसके अंदर आप फाइनेंशियल अकाउंट के अंदर भी डाल सकते हैं, जो लोन्स वगैरह आपको गवर्नमेंट की तरफ से मिल जाते हैं. राइट. इट्स इंटर गवर्नमेंट लोन्स और ये काफी रीजनेबल अमाउंट्स होती हैं. पाकिस्तान के केस में तो लाइक वी टॉकिंग बिलियंस ऑफ डॉलर्स की बेसिकली. Right. And then finally, the fourth account is about the reserve assets. reserve asset, something that you keep at the back end. Who keeps it? The central bank, of course. The central bank keeps it at the back end. It could be in terms of gold. I'm sure कि recent times में आपने सुना होगा कि the central banks are buying a lot of gold reserves. अभी तो फिलहाल the war is going on. There's sort of like some of them are selling it also, which is pressuring the gold to fall down for the moment. But a lot of governments जो है वो gold की holdings रखते हैं, because remember gold is the most liquid form in the sense के uh, for the governments they can sell the golds to other governments if they owe. Even an individual who owns gold and their stock is not doing so well and they need money, gold is the quickest in that duration. Obviously cash to apni jagah hai, but usually people don't have that much cash, so phir they have to sell off their gold. That's another reason why the gold is falling during this war, because people who had borrowed money and sort of on that borrowed loaned amount, they bought like shares of companies and cryptocurrencies and gold positions. So now when the stock markets are falling and they've been told कि भाई आपने loans के ऊपर जो stocks खरीदे हुए हैं on leverage positions, you need to keep more money in the banks. तो फिर now they have to sell the golds in order to close those positions. जब तुम future में finance पढ़ोगे तो you will hear this term called margin calls आ रही हैं उनको. Margin calls is basically I've bought shares on a loan and I have promised to buy them in the future. Right now, I have given like a little percentage of it, 20, 30%. I still owe 70%, right? So now if the stocks are falling down in value, so whoever has given me the loan, they feel that, oh, now the stock prices are falling down. So, is this person going to be able to pay that money back to us or not? So they ask for those payments or asks for a little extra cash in hand. It's much more complicated than that, but I'm just trying to simplify. But you can deal with this later on. ये सब future की बातें हैं. But all we're talking about is reserve assets के अंदर it's your gold, it's your foreign currencies जो हम dollars वगैरह रखते हैं दुनिया भर में, and then it is the money with the international monetary funds जो हमें बोलती हैं कि आपने कुछ अपने रिजर्व्स में पैसे रखा होना जरूरी है आपके पास in terms of dollars. And sometimes there's this thing called special drawing rights. एक ये भी होता है, but I don't see कि उसकी कितनी importance है for your purpose. But the key idea over here is कि ये जो reserves होते हैं ये central bank basically use करते हैं. It could be like gold and foreign currencies to basically stabilize their currency exchange rate. ओके, तो ये होता है. उसके अलावा एक एरर्स एंड ओमिशंस की इन्होंने बात की है. यूजुअली मैं तो वो एरर्स एंड ओमिशंस फाइनेंशियल अकाउंट के अंदर ही करा देता हूँ, बट at least in Bamford, they're not dealing it as one of the part of the financial account. This is how they're including it. The balance of payment consists of current account, capital account, and financial account. Full stop. It also includes net errors and omissions, also known as balancing item. And for some countries, the financial account is the largest component of the BOP. Okay, so they're not clarifying कि ये errors and omission account कहाँ होता है, but they're saying that there is something called an errors and omission account also. Let me tell you what this is basically. Errors and omissions. ये accounting में भी आप पढ़ते हैं. The thing is, एक country के अंदर there are so many transactions of millions and hundreds and thousands of dollars की transactions which are taking place, right? तो जब ये transactions हो रही होती हैं, तो ऑब्वियसली कभी हो सकता है कि आपने एरर कर दिया हो एंड यू माइट हैव मिस टाइप्ड अ पर्टिकुलर नंबर. ओके. एंड व्हेन यू मिस टाइप दैट नंबर, उसके बड़े मेजर रिपल इफेक्ट्स आ सकते हैं, क्योंकि बैलेंस ऑफ पेमेंट इज नॉट मैचिंग. द मनी कमिंग इन इज नॉट इक्वल्स टू द मनी गोइंग आउट. एंड इट्स पॉसिबल, होता है, बिल्कुल होता है. ह्यूमन एरर. बट देन as the time goes by and you have data coming in over the period of time and things don't tally, so maybe as time goes by you might pick up on those errors and you may fix them. So errors and omission for the short term उसको बेसिकली डील करता है कि अभी चलो ठीक है, the money coming in is not matching the money going out. So let's just put suspense account की तरह एक certain X amount of money so that we can balance it. Hence the name balancing item. Okay, balancing item. Okay, but ये short run के अंदर होता है. Long run के अंदर with the enough data, you basically balance it off. You find the correct numbers. Same goes with omissions. It's not an error, but something you missed out on. Transaction that you did not record, it sort of like got, missed out for any reason. तो ऐसी भी होती है because remember, every single day there are plenty of transactions happening. इसको बैम्फर्ड के अंदर भी एक पैराग्राफ के अंदर इन्होंने बल्कि 3-4 पैराग्राफ्स लगाए हैं नेट एरर्स एंड ओमिशंस के डिस्कशन को. बाय स्टार्टिंग ऑफ नंबर वन देयर सेइंग कि देखें जी, बैलेंस ऑफ पेमेंट जो होता है ना, करंट कैपिटल और फाइनेंशियल अकाउंट को जब आप व्हेन यू टेक इनटू अकाउंट, a balance of payment as a whole must always balance. Okay, the credit, yani the inflows, should meet the debit, which is the outflow. ठीक है. um, for example, if a country sells exports, हमने goods exports किए, तो क्या होगा, एक्सपोर्ट्स की वजह से जो पैसे आएंगे उसको हम क्रेडिट एंट्री लेंगे. ठीक है. To purchase the exports, the foreigners will have to obtain the currency of the country जो हो ये प्रोडक्ट को एक्सपोर्ट कर रही है. एंड सो उनके पास ये डेबिट होगी, हमारे पास ये क्रेडिट होगी, बिकॉज द मनी इज कमिंग इन. ओके. अगर आपके पास, if you have a deficit on the current account of balance of payment, that should match with the surplus of equal values of the capital and the financial. Basically offset होना चाहिए कि अगर करंट अकाउंट में -2 है तो कैपिटल और फाइनेंशियल +2 होना चाहिए ताकि ये बैलेंस ऑफ हो जाए. बट इन प्रैक्टिस, with so many transactions involved, ये मैं तुमको बैम्फर्ड की पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू दे रहा हूं, it is difficult to keep an accurate record. Some mistakes are likely to be made and some transactions may not be included. जो मैंने बात की है बेसिकली, गलत नंबर्स डल गए और कोई ट्रांजैक्शन मिस हो गई. To compensate for this, a net errors and omission figure is included. ठीक है, वो आप डाल देते हैं इसके अंदर. By including this, basically जो error है वो आप remove कर देते हैं for the time being. And then the next paragraph, more and better quality information is likely to become available over time, yani long run के अंदर. And so the size of the errors and omission uh, figures usually declines. The value of current account deficits experienced by some countries should be matched by the value of the current account surplus experienced by the other countries. But again, due to mistakes and items being left out, this is not the case. So errors and omission account short run के लिए एक थोड़ा सा एक necessity बन जाती है, which helps you sort. Okay जी. तो ये एक हमारी बेसिकली अंडरस्टैंडिंग हो जाती है. नाउ अ फ्यू मोर थिंग्स. ठीक है. लेट मी गो अ बिट इन इट. We were talking about capital account and we said देखें जी कैपिटल अकाउंट के अंदर आप डेट फॉरगिवनेस को लेते हैं, कैपिटल अकाउंट में आप माइग्रेशन वाले पैसे को लेते हैं, ट्रेडमार्क, कॉपी राइट, पेटेंट्स आप इनको लेते हैं, मिनरल राइट्स जो पाकिस्तान में बड़े बिके हैं अभी रिसेंट टाइम्स के अंदर आप इनको भी लेते हैं। ठीक है, सो इसकी वजह से यूजली कंट्रीज जो है इनफ्लोज एंड आउटफ्लोज दोनों तरीके के आपके पास आ जाते हैं। ठीक है, फिर जब हम फाइनेंशियल अकाउंट के अंदर जाते हैं एंड लाइक लाइक आई मेंशन कि फाइनेंशियल अकाउंट यूजुअली कैपिटल अकाउंट से ज्यादा बड़ी पोजीशन लेता है, तो इसीलिए फाइनेंशियल अकाउंट का डेफिसिट और फाइनेंशियल अकाउंट का सरप्लस हमारे लिए थोड़ा सा यू नो नोटिस वर्दी होना चाहिए कि इफ वी हैव अ फाइनेंशियल अकाउंट डेफिसिट, तो शुड वी कंसिडर दिस एज अ प्रॉब्लम और नॉट, राइट? Because financial account is telling us, okay, deficit means that there is more money going out and less money is coming in. Okay. Now, may sound like a problematic issue. Okay, if Pakistanis don't believe in Pakistan and what they're basically doing is they're maybe investing abroad, maybe taking their money to Dubai and all these places. And foreigners are not interested in investing in Pakistan, right? If you look at the current 2023, 2022 की position of sorry, 2022 onwards position, अगर आप देख लें up until now, 2026, we're not looking at a lot of money coming into Pakistan. Actually, financial accounts के अंदर जो हमारी investments हैं, foreign investments, they're actually going down. They're very low right now. That's a problematic situation. So first, let me talk about अगर आपके पास deficit आ रहा है, तो what Bamford wants to say about it, which is relevant for your essay and marking scheme के point of view, say that a financial account is not necessarily a problem because your essay needs to discuss both things. It's not necessarily a problem, especially as it will give rise to inflows of profits, interest, and dividends in the future. राइट, ये आपके करंट अकाउंट में प्राइमरी इनकम में जाता है। आज हम इन्वेस्ट कर रहे हैं, मनी इज गोइंग आउट, बट इन द फ्यूचर द मनी इज गोइंग टू कम इन टू द कंट्री, सो दोज स्मॉल इनफ्लोज इन फ्यूचर फॉर वट एवर टाइम दैट माइट बी बेनिफिट। The deficit may also be a short term resulting from hot money outflow of the country in search of higher interest rate and in expectation that other countries' currency may rise in value। ये जो आप जिसको आप स्पेकुलेशन कहते हैं, ये जो शॉर्ट टर्म मनी की जो मूवमेंट होती है बेसिकली आपकी इकोनॉमी से, राइट, दैट्स व्हाट इट इज टॉकिंग अबाउट, दैट समटाइम पीपल डू दैट स्पेकुलेशन, कभी करेंसी में करते हो, कभी हायर इंटरेस्ट रेट के टर्म्स में करते हो, तो मे बी इट्स नॉट कंसिडर्ड ऑफ सच अ बिग प्रॉब्लम। A financial account deficit is more of a concern. However, it is results from a long-term lack of confidence in the country's economic prospects. तो मैंने जो starting के अंदर इसकी deficit की बात की, I was talking more of the serious problem. क्योंकि ये जो capital flight हो रही है, ये पैसा जो बाहर जा रहा है, this is leaving the country and it's likelihood that it's not going to come back for at least near future। जैसे पाकिस्तान से आपकी जो इतनी सारी मल्टीनेशनल्स क्लोज होके अपना पैसा लेके जा रही है, मल्टीनेशनल्स डोंट मेक शॉर्ट टर्म डिसीजंस, देयर डिसीजंस इज फॉर द फ्यूचर, लॉन्ग टर्म। So they're thinking if Pakistan may next 5, 10 years, there's nothing to be made. So, it's not worthy of our capital. We might as well take this money in other countries, like let's say Africa or someplace, right? या यूएई में चला जाता। अभी यूएई में जो प्रॉब्लम आ रही है, ऑब्वियसली नाउ दे वुड बी थिंकिंग कि यूएई के अंदर ये पैसा कितना रेलेवेंट है। सो दिस इज कॉल्ड द कैपिटल फ्लाइट एंड इट माइट बी अ प्रॉब्लम। सो when the country's residents move their money from domestic to foreign banks and the country's firms move some production abroad, the movement of fund and production out of the country reduces tax revenue. and reduces potential employment economic growth. Sort of like we're thinking कि क्योंकि जब inflow कम है और outflow ज़्यादा है, so your entire circular flow shrinks and your economy shrinks and AD shrinks, government funds shrinks. So across it creates a problem. So a financial account deficit may also result in the depreciation क्योंकि जब inflow कम है, so that means the demand for your currency is less and the supply for your currency is more. Therefore, depreciation, so your currency weakens and then people speculate on that and all of that. ठीक हो गया. तो ये आपका बड़ा एक major discussion है in which you talk about whether the money is on the short run move or it is in the long run. Is it due to the lack of confidence or is it just a short term speculative movement? Okay. फिर उसके बाद ये तो फाइनेंशियल का पहला एलिमेंट हो गया. देन वी वांट टू टॉक अबाउट कि इफ यू हैव अ सरप्लस इन योर फाइनेंशियल अकाउंट, अब इसको हम कैसे डील करें. तो अगर आपके पास सरप्लस है तो वन ऑफ द मीनिंग्स ऑफ इट इज दैट देयर इज मोर मनी कमिंग इन देन मनी गोइंग आउट. तो अगर हम एक्सचेंज रेट के पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से देखें तो द डिमांड फॉर योर करेंसी इज मोर देन योर सप्लाई. That may appreciate your currency and it has its own goods and bads, right? Remember that. So some of the issues are, you know, advantages. Let's deal with the advantages first. Some of the advantages, अगर आप financial account की बात करें, तो uh, if you have more money coming in, inflows आ रहे हैं, और आपके current account में deficit है, trade in goods, trade in service, because you're importing a lot of stuff. तो वो जो करंट अकाउंट के डेफिसिट्स हैं, एक्चुअली दिस फाइनेंशियल अकाउंट के इनफ्लोज कैन फाइनेंस दोज. यू कैन यूज दैट मनी एंड बेसिकली गेट दोज इंपोर्टेड स्टफ दैट यू नीड. ओके. इट कैन ऑल्सो क्रिएट एम्प्लॉयमेंट इन द कंट्री, खास तौर पे अगर वो डायरेक्ट इन्वेस्टमेंट्स वाले हैं जिसमें फैक्ट्रीज वगैरह लग रही हैं, एंड दैट कैन रेज द कंट्रीज इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ. ओके. इन द लॉन्ग रन हाउएवर, ये जो सारी इन्वेस्टमेंट्स आई हैं, इनके जब आप प्रॉफिट्स और डिविडेंड्स और इंटरेस्ट पे करेंगे, सो देयर गोइंग टू बी लाइक अ परपेचुअल आउटफ्लोज इन द current account, okay, which you have to pay back later on. And this may result in the deficit on the primary incomes of the current account, unless कि वो ऑफसेट हो रहे हों बाय एन इंक्रीज इन द कंट्रीज डायरेक्ट एंड पोर्टफोलियो इन्वेस्टमेंट्स एंड लोन्स फ्रॉम अब्रॉड. अगर वो पैसा आता जा रहा है एंड इवन इफ यू हैव टू पे बैक, no problem whatsoever, because it's sort of like balances off, sort of like Dubai situation, that a lot of people have invested in Dubai now. अब जब लोग rents कमाते हैं on the apartments that they've bought, or the stock they've earned, that money, when it goes in terms of the profits and all, the thing is there's always new fresh money coming into Dubai. So that sort of like finances this whole thing that they have. ठीक हो गया. तो ये हमारी ये basically discussion हो जाता है, which you have to be mindful of. अब based on this whole thing, couple of things we have to remember is, because the topic is policies to correct disequilibrium in the BOP. Remember one thing. When we talk about BOP disequilibrium, we are talking about both the surplus and the deficit, right? Deficit, surplus, we usually don't worry about so much. Surplus, we don't worry because surplus is a good now. Money coming in is more than the money going out. Sure, it has its own issues also, that there's more inflow than outflow. Your currency might appreciate. Okay, you don't want your currency to appreciate. Let's buy foreign currency reserves and store it. सही है, that's not bad. Reserves आ गए future के लिए. But the key issue is that you are not buying enough imported goods, जिसकी वजह से आपके local लोगों का living standard improve नहीं हो रहा. Because surplus कब आता है? When your exports are more than imports. More countries' resources are going abroad, but much is not coming back in. So domestic लोगों का living standard sort of like gets compromised in a way. असल जो issue आता है वो deficit का है. Right? So usually what we're trying to correct is the deficit, but again, अगर क्वेश्चन के अंदर कहते हैं कि सरप्लस इज द प्रॉब्लम विच वी वांट टू फिक्स, देयर आर ट्रिक्स टू डू दैट, एंड डेफिसिट लिखा है तो देन देयर आर ट्रिक्स टू डू दैट. तो ये पूरा आपका पॉलिसीज का एक जो फ्रेमवर्क है. लास्ट चैप्टर्स के अंदर हमने मैक्रो इकोनॉमिक ऑब्जेक्टिव्स एंड पॉलिसीज की बात की थी, द फिस्कल, मॉनेटरी, सप्लाई साइड एंड एक्सचेंज रेट एंड प्रोटेक्शनिस्ट. Lekin I only discussed them in terms of in terms of economic growth, price stability, and unemployment. Now let's talk in terms of the balance of payments and how you can fix that. Okay? एक पॉलिसी है जिसको हम कहते हैं फिस्कल पॉलिसी, राइट? एंड हमें पता है फिस्कल पॉलिसी इज अ डिमांड साइड पॉलिसी, ऐसा ही है, and it is very effective in the short run, and it is very easy and quick to implement, right? Some good things about fiscal policy. But what it includes is government spending versus taxation. Now, AD का तो मुझे समझ आता है that how it affects aggregate demand, government spending and taxes. Government directly affects AD and taxation indirectly affects through consumption and investment. लेकिन we need to connect it to the balance of payment जो हम export import से connect करेंगे. ठीक है? तो how will this have an effect? तो हम जाएंगे for a contractionary policy. So make sure you do mention contractionary. We want to see that word. If we go for contractionary fiscal and fiscal policy here, government spending कम करो, taxation बढ़ाओ. One is कि जब हमने गवर्नमेंट स्पेंडिंग की तो वो डायरेक्टली हो सकता है कि वो इंपोर्टेड गुड्स जो गवर्नमेंट मंगाती है उसको टारगेट करके इंपोर्ट्स कम करें. ओके. Dusra is that when you have higher taxes, it reduces people's disposable income, therefore reducing people's consumption, and eventually even businesses के ऊपर high taxation reduces their investments, overall reduces the aggregate demand. ये तो ठीक है, लेकिन इसका balance of payment, export import से क्या हाल होगा? So we say when people are taxed and they have less money available, they're buying both less of domestic and less of imports also. They don't have the money. तो उसकी वजह से imports में भी reduction आ जाता है. Imports में reduction actually यहाँ लिखूंगा तो थोड़ा सा AD के साथ contradict कर जाएगा. I'll write it separately. That fall in disposable income will lead to imports to fall because people don't have enough money. And साथ ही में when people's consumption is falling, businesses have no choice. Businesses starts to export, and that causes the exports to rise and solves our balance of payment. So this is how you will sort of explain. ठीक है? तो ये आपका फिस्कल पॉलिसी का डिस्कशन हो जाता है. काइंड ऑफ लाइक मॉनेटरी पॉलिसी भी यही फ्रेमवर्क पे चलती है. Monetary policy is also demand side, much more quicker to implement, short run advantage, but it uses money supply and interest rate. Again, you're going to go for a contractionary policy, reduce money supply, increase the interest rate, and the rest, the entire effect will be the same, but from the borrowing point of view. That the cost of borrowing will rise, therefore, borrowing is going to fall, and so people will consume less, invest less, and cause the AD to fall, and then businesses will have no choice uh, but to export the product abroad, and they will not have enough money, so they'll import. Now AS के अंदर तो हम इसको इसी तरह से पढ़ाते थे. Actually what I can do is इन्हीं पॉलिसीज को मैं नाम दे देता हूं, एंड द नेम इज, इफ यू लुक एट माय ओल्ड लेक्चर्स उसके अंदर तो आई यूज्ड टू नेम है, बट सिंस उन्होंने काइंड ऑफ लाइक निकाल दिया उसमें से एएस के कोर्स में से 2023 ऑनवर्ड, सो यू माइट नॉट सी मी यूजिंग दिस टर्म. बट ये एक तरीके का एक्सपेंडिचर रिड्यूसिंग पॉलिसी है, contractionary fiscal and monetary policy, because if you notice expenditure reducing कह रहे हैं ना हम, right? Expenditure reducing, look at this. AD falling down is actually expenditure reducing. CNI is going down is that. So clearly we can do that. ठीक है. अगर मैं तुमको एक्सर्प्ट से ही करा दूं बैम्फर्ड के पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से, so let me just point it out for you. It says expenditure reducing policy to correct BOP. Expenditure reducing policy is any action taken by the government that is designed to reduce the total level of spending in the economy. Okay? And an expenditure reducing policy has two effects. One, it reduces the spending, okay, which will mean that there will be fewer purchases of import goods, which I have sort of spoken about over here. Imported goods की consumption कम हो जाएगी. Okay. And the second is that the domestic producers will find that their domestic market is reduced because consumers or businesses नहीं खरीद रहे हैं वो goods and services, and even the government. So as a result, the domestic producers may try to make up for that decrease in domestic sales with an increase in the sales abroad. Obviously, इसका success depends on international prices हमसे ज्यादा हैं कि नहीं है, elasticity किस तरह से है, the whole Marshall Learners और उसका discussion may come about over here, but let's not jump too ahead. The overall effect of expenditure reducing policy may be a fall in import and a rise in export. But remember, आपका एडी जब चेंज होता है तो उससे इन्फ्लेशन पे इम्पैक्ट, उससे आपका अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट पे इम्पैक्ट, उससे आपका economic growth पे impact, and then eventually living standards and all of those things also get affected. The last paragraph says that the fiscal policy and monetary policy can be used as expenditure reducing policy. So it can be used. I say use it, tension free. A government could raise the taxes and cut its spending. A central bank may reduce the money and increase the interest rate to reduce the spending in the economy. Basically, we just had two different approaches to answer the same idea. Okay, expenditure reducing policy, this is how it works. तो we would prefer कि आप उसी तरीके से इसको explain किया जाए. ठीक है, बट लाइक दे सेड कि रिड्यूसिंग पॉलिसी में कोई भी पॉलिसी हो सकती है जो बेसिकली डोमेस्टिक एक्सपेंडिचर को टारगेट करती है. ठीक हो गया. फिर उसके बाद हमारे पास एक होती है जिसको हम बोलते हैं द सप्लाई साइड पॉलिसी. सप्लाई साइड पॉलिसीज आर ऑल दोज एजुकेशन एंड ट्रेनिंग, investment in infrastructure, right? And then you have technology, then you have privatization, deregulations, direct taxes कम करना, ये सब supply side में चली जाती हैं. Labor, trade unions reforms करना. All of these, the point is that you want aggregate supply to increase, causing the price levels to fall, making your product competitive. And when your product is competitive, your exports may rise and imports may fall. And so your current account may improve, leading your BOP to get better. ठीक है, this is the way we make the connection for the supply side. Use that, tension free. I don't think it should create any issues. हाँ, ये बस मसला जरूर है कि ये थोड़ी सी लॉन्ग रन पॉलिसीज होती हैं. और ये थोड़ी सी कॉस्टली हो सकती हैं, और ये पॉलिसी शॉर्ट रन के अंदर एडी को बढ़ा के, बिकॉज रिमेंबर जी गोज अप, तो शॉर्ट रन के अंदर एडी को बढ़ा के इट कैन कॉज इन्फ्लेशन टू कम इन द शॉर्ट रन, एंड दैट माइट हर्ट यू इन द शॉर्ट रन, राइट? तो ये आपकी उसकी लिमिटेशंस होती हैं, तो sort of like I'm just speeding up on that. Okay, one of बल्कि two major other policies जो ज्यादातर I personally say कि it's always more preferential, ठीक है, which is what? एक हमने एएस में पढ़ा था, if you remember the protectionist policies. Protectionist policies basically प्रोटेक्शनिज्म की हमने बात की थी। एएस में हम 3 मार्क के लिए प्रोटेक्शनिज्म को एक्सप्लेन करते थे, लाइक protectionism is when you protect the domestic firms from foreign competition. How do you do that? By making your own price competitive, okay? And restricting free trade. ये 3 मार्क मिलते थे आपको knowledge and understanding के to explain protectionism. Protectionist policies के अंदर we deal with ideas like tariffs and quotas and embargoes and subsidies and anti-dumping policies and things like that, countervailing duties जिसको हम कहते हैं. But the key idea in all of these policies are, except for subsidies actually, all of these is going to cause the prices to rise and therefore the imports to fall. Tariffs does it by putting a percentage tax on it. Quotas does it by the physical reduction, and embargoes does it by ban making it illegal, जैसे हमारे यहाँ इंडिया के प्रोडक्ट्स की बात होती है. But they all raise the prices, okay, because there is difference. लेकिन जहां तक सब्सिडी की बात है, export subsidies, they lower the price and they basically make your exports encouraging and imports falls as a result of that. This is how the correction is made. Now that we've sort of, अच्छा, इसी के साथ ही मैं एक और भी बता देता हूँ, which is our exchange rate की policy. एक्सचेंज रेट के अंदर व्हेन वी बेसिकली एक्सपोर्ट्स को इनकरेज करना और इंपोर्ट को डिस्करेज करना है, तो वी टॉक अबाउट डीवैल्यूएशन. वी डीवैल्यू आवर करेंसी, what happens as a result is that our currency becomes cheaper, right? In devaluation, our product becomes cheaper for the foreigners, so they start buying more of it. And imports become expensive, so we buy less of it, and therefore the current account improves. लेकिन यहाँ दो आइडियाज हमने पढ़े थे. एक था मार्शल लर्नर्स कंडीशन, विच सेड कि शॉर्ट रन के अंदर एक्सपोर्ट्स और इंपोर्ट्स जो होते हैं वो इनइलास्टिक होते हैं. तो उसके इनइलास्टिक होने की वजह से शॉर्ट रन के अंदर डीवैल्यूएशन एक्चुअली करंट अकाउंट को वर्सन कर देता है. बट इन द लॉन्ग रन जब ये इलास्टिक हो जाते हैं तो करंट अकाउंट इंप्रूव करता है. सो दैट मीन्स अगर इफ यू आर डीवैल्यूइंग योर करेंसी, योर लॉन्ग रन के अंदर यू मे बेनिफिट, बट इन द शॉर्ट रन यू माइट नॉट. ओके, तो ये आपका एक्सचेंज रेट का आइडिया था, एंड द होल मार्शल लर्नर्स, यू कैन look into the detailed lectures of it. Obviously, these policies are available. To conclude this part, ये जो हमारे पास पॉलिसीज है ना, प्रोटेक्शनिस्ट पॉलिसीज, एंड इवन टू अ डिग्री मैं तो कहता हूँ एक्सचेंज रेट पॉलिसी, स्विचिंग पॉलिसी, ये तीनों, ओके. So let me read from the expenditure switching policy from the Bamford's point of view, exactly what it is. So Bamford says an expenditure switching policy is any action taken by the government that is designed to persuade producers of a good or service, both at home and abroad, to buy more of that goods and services and less of the goods and services of the other country. You want to switch them. Expenditure reducing was not like that. Expenditure reducing was, let's kill your buying power so that you don't buy local and international goods. यहाँ आप क्या कह रहे हो? Let's do something where the local consumers stop buying foreign goods and move towards the local one. It's a much nicer policy by. So this would include any policy designed to persuade domestic households and firms to buy domestically produced goods and services rather than import. It would also include policy tools designed to persuade foreign households and firms to buy more exports from our country. Okay, okay, उनको encourage करो जैसे हम exchange rate के साथ करते हैं. Expenditure switching policy are not designed to reduce the total amount of spending in the country, but to redirect or switch spending to the country's product rather than foreign goods. The intended impact is a fall in import expenditure and a rise in export earning. Balance of payment ठीक हो जाएगा. And to sum it up, the type of policy which are commonly used as expenditure switching policy are the supply side, protectionist, and exchange rate policy. ये तीनों जो हैं, according to Bamford, expenditure switching policy के अंदर consider की जाएगी. But make sure when you're answering, you want to clarify that you want people to buy the domestic goods and not the international, by encouraging the domestic consumers and producers or foreign consumers, basically. ठीक है? So, for example, a government may increase spending on infrastructure, a supply side, to reduce the cost and price of domestic products, and may impose import tariffs to reduce demand for imported goods, or may instruct its central bank to lower the exchange rate, to lower the export prices, and raise the import prices. ये basically आपका एक overall chapter है. It's a very, very, very important chapter because I feel it is necessary for this year. Macro के अंदर इसके ऊपर बिल्कुल ऐसे आ सकता है. Okay. So in the next class, basically, I will deal with the essay. जो वो 4 essays थे उसमें से मैं 2 कर दूंगा जो basically overall framework को discuss कर लेगा. But they're very simple and not difficult at all. Right?